From the campus of the University of Kentucky, you're listening to Behind the Blue. I'm Cody Kaiser with UK Strategic Communications.
I feel like, part of what excites me about teaching at this university or at a university in general is the ability to teach and inspire future leaders kind of over and over again. And kind of you're also forced to kind of stay on your toes because you also want to relate to students of many different backgrounds. And so I feel this as kind of a great motivator, a great challenge for me to keep doing, what, I am passionate about, which is kind of bringing my love for psychological science with students across the Commonwealth.
That's Matthew Kim, an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology in the College of Arts and Sciences, and one of 6 recipients of the 2025 Great Teacher Awards. The University of Kentucky Alumni Association started the Great Teacher Award program in 1961 to honor excellent teaching at the university. There have been more than 300 teachers honored since that first year. Nominations may only be submitted by current students. To receive the award, a candidate must hold the rank of full-time lecturer or above and have been a member of the faculty for the past 3 years at UK, have superior knowledge of the subject matter, have original and innovative classroom presentations, demonstrate concern for students both inside and outside the classroom setting, and not have been a recipient of the award for the past 10 years. Kim leads the Developing Minds Lab, where his research, funded by the National Science Foundation, examines the nature and development of motivation and self-regulation skills in K-12 and post-secondary students. On this episode of Behind the Blue, my colleague Steve Schaefer spotlights this Great Teacher Award winner.
Dr. Matthew Kim, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Tell me, how did you find out that you were nominated for a Great Teacher Award?
Well, I was sitting teaching my graduate seminar in Castle Hall. We had actually moved to a different room because we had some plumbing issues in our original room. But we were halfway through, and my department chair, Michelle, walks in and says that there's some sort of interruption. Wasn't really sure how to react to it. I was kind of worried at first, like, did I do something wrong? But then people started coming into the room, and then I saw the balloons, and I figured, I think this is good. It's probably good news. And it was a complete surprise. Complete surprise. My students didn't know. I didn't know.
Yeah, I've been to those surprises before. I wasn't able to go this year, but they're pretty cool, especially, usually nobody has a sort of inkling that this is happening.
Sure.
And it's usually pretty fun. This award is very student driven. Students have to sort of drive the process from beginning to end. What does it mean for you to be nominated for an award like this that is so student centric?
Well, first, I'm truly honored. My focus ever since coming to the University of Kentucky is to think about how in my research and teaching mission, I can put students first, provide them with meaningful experiences, really kind of enhance as much engagement as possible. And so I've tried to make that, front and center in my work. And so the fact that one of my former students, who I remember very well, participated in class, even though it was a big lecture class. When I realized that she was the one who nominated me, I felt truly honored, truly humbled. I know that there are many deserving teachers at the university and in my department, so I just feel honored to have been selected.
It's a pretty long-running award as well, so it's pretty prestigious. What do you hope, as a teacher, to bring to class to kind of motivate and inspire students?
Sure. So, I'll say that I have a performing arts background. And so, I personally am inspired when I see, go to shows, concerts, recitals, dance, acting, music, just seeing the professionalism that they provide on stage kind of day in and day out. They're doing the same thing over and over, but to different audiences. And every time I just, come out of a concert like that, I feel inspired by their artistry, their professionalism. And so given kind of my own experience, my background, I try to bring that same mentality into the classroom. I think of each lecture that I provide as a sort of performance. I'm at that stage, but I also want to kind of engage my students as much as I can to make them really feel like, it was worth coming to class, even though it's cold, it's in the morning, but, they just get a performance that they'll learn something, but they'll have fun while that learning is happening. So that's kind of how I kind of approach the classes that I teach.
I didn't have that on my bingo card for this interview, that you were going to connect psychology to performance, which I think is great. It's amazing to, and it is, I teach a little myself. And so it is, you kind of have to give them a little bit of a show.
Of course.
How do you think this award will carry forward in your teaching, sort of as you move on through time?
Well, I feel like it kind of helps kind of reinforce for me some of the things. I'm pleased to kind of hear that kind of what I've done in the classroom has been acknowledged and really kind of received well by students. And so, I like to play kind of different types of games, engage students in different ways, both kind of what they see on the screen, but also what they hear, what they do. So I would love to continue doing that. I feel like, part of what excites me about teaching at this university or at a university in general is the ability to teach and inspire future leaders kind of over and over again. And kind of you're also forced to kind of stay on your toes because you also want to relate to students of many different backgrounds. And so I feel this as kind of a great motivator, a great challenge for me to keep doing, what, I am passionate about, which is kind of bringing my love for psychological science with students across the Commonwealth.
Do you have, you've kind of touched on this a little bit, but do you have a teaching philosophy?
I think my philosophy, is largely, I think it largely revolves around, and I'll say this, as faculty in the psychology department, we study, human behavior. I'm a developmental psychologist, so we study how, children, adults, how we grow and develop and adapt over the lifespan. And so I feel like there's something intrinsically interesting and motivating about those topics that I feel students really hold on to. So I feel like my teaching philosophy, the core is kind of making sure that students kind of see the relevance of developmental psychology and psychological science. I feel like what's kind of easy for me is I feel psychology is such an intrinsically interesting and motivating topic. And so students come, I think, primed with this curiosity about how the mind works and how we behave and how we develop. And so I kind of capitalize on that by ensuring that students are active in their learning. They're not just sitting down taking notes, which I don't like because, as someone who appreciates a good performance, I want them to kind of be excited about the topic across the 75-minute lecture, maybe throw in some surprises, some unexpected things that they may not have kind of come to class expecting. And I feel like those moments of uncertainty, of kind of surprise can really help students appreciate just how complex the human mind is.
With that kind of teaching, they may not even need to take notes. Like they're going to retain it if it's something they've enjoyed and they've engaged with, they don't need to take notes.
I completely agree. I'm
sure there's a place out in the non-academic world for you somewhere out there. What motivates you to keep teaching?
What I love about teaching is being able to kind of share my love of psychological science with the future leaders of Kentucky and this world. I feel like I see it as part of my responsibility to kind of help students think critically about issues related to human behavior, kind of understand how to access, understand complex information, kind of understand how to digest that information in ways that will help them, even if they're not going to, pursue a career in psychology. But I think those types of skills can be conveyed, in the psychology classroom.
What are you trying to teach them sort of besides principles of psychology? Like what are those sort of intangibles?
Sure. One core thing that I try to convey in my developmental psychology class is no one has it figured out. And I'll share very kind of openly, when I was younger, I would look up to adults, parents, and thinking that they had everything figured out. And as I also kind of get older, I have 2 young kids of my own, and I kind of reflect on, kind of my role both as a teacher of college students, but also as a teacher, in my own home, just appreciating just how challenging, but how varied kind of different life circumstances are. And so, one thing that I like to convey to students is, give yourself grace as you learn and develop, because developmental psychology doesn't end when you're 18. There's always kind of new challenges, new opportunities. And so I try to weave in research, maybe some personal anecdotes from my own life to try to convey to students that, your life is just getting started and there's so much that you can accomplish and do in this world.
Yeah, and you can't, what I've learned is you can't get it past them if you don't know. You just need to own it and know and say, I don't know, but I'm going to find out.
Sure.
Because they'll call you on it every time.
They'll call you on it. I do feel there's so much to learn and there's so much that we don't know. And I do feel kind of part of what I enjoy about being in the classroom is, if I see something like, let's say, a brand new research study that just came out that relates to something that we're learning in class, like I really want to take that opportunity to say, hey, look what I just found out, just like maybe a couple of weeks ago, let me share that with you. And I feel like students really appreciate that knowledge is still developing, it can correct, new insights can be gained. And so I think those are things that are always a good opportunity in classrooms.
Yeah, I always kind of feel like that, as a teacher, I'm learning almost as much from the students as the students are learning from me, because they're coming at this, whole photography video thing from a whole different perspective than I've come. I've been doing it for almost 40 years. They're coming at it from a completely, when I started, the world was way different. They're coming at it being native in this, having made the most photographs of any generation,
Sure.
And so they have a different perspective on it. And I appreciate that. And I, want them to sort of share it and tell me when they feel like I'm wrong.
I completely agree.
Tell me about your students a little bit. What are they like?
It's hard for me to answer that question because I feel every semester the students are, they're all curious. They have very kind of varied kind of life experiences, perspectives. So those are things that I found my students to kind of share every semester. But what I enjoy is that, over a 16-week semester, I try my best to learn kind of students' names to kind of, even though it might be a large lecture class, in those large classes I teach, to kind of get to know them. And as we do, I feel like, we have this kind of, so every semester, and I can say students they're smart, they're curious, they have very different kind of personal life experiences and backgrounds that I really think enriches each semester, because even though I might be teaching a class, pretty much the same topics, semester in, semester out, the insights that students bring to that material is always different. And so being able to appreciate kind of what they bring is always something that gets me excited to come to the classroom every week. I've just really enjoyed just how bright students are here. And, I feel at the end of every lecture, I just feel like, I'm very excited for kind of what they're going to accomplish, whether it's in psychology or in another field. That's what I come away with every semester.
So psychology is, like, I'm sure you have both. You have people who are psychology majors and then people who take psychology who are various other kinds of majors. What's it like for you to sort of have students sort of out in the world doing cool things, whether it's in psychology or in other things? What's it like for you to have those students sort of leave here and go out and do big things, or maybe they just go home and they, make their hometown better? But what's it like for you to have them out there in the world?
I remember, when I was an undergrad in college, can I think of what are some things that I learned in my psychology classes? And if I'm completely honest, I don't really remember specifics. What I do remember are kind of the overall classroom experiences. Young people today, they call them vibes, like, right? The vibes of a class. And so I feel like my approach has been, again, given kind of my performing arts background, I want to give them a great performance. I want them to have kind of appreciated something about psychological science, at the end of every lecture. And I feel like over the course of a whole semester, just kind of gaining an appreciation for, there's excellent research being done in our psychology department here at UK that's changing lives, that, as, students embark into careers, they become leaders as well, that they'll remember something, whether it's my class or some other class in psychology at UK, kind of understanding that research is important. We can digest information intelligently. We can take different perspectives. We can be open-minded. I feel like at the end of the day, it's less about core content in psychology, but maybe just the general approach to learning and scholarship.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's one of our main jobs as a teacher, as faculty is, and I've tried to have this approach with my daughter, who is a freshman in college now, is just to learn how to learn. I feel like you can do anything if you know how to learn. And that's, you don't have to be a master of anything, but you can sort of figure it out as you go.
Absolutely.
And it may be the most important thing that we can teach them is to be sort of self-sufficient and to just figure it out. Because, I'm doing things in my professional life that I did not have classes for in college and that I never thought that I would be doing, but I've just figured it out as I've gone along. How have your students inspired you, and maybe even what have they taught you?
I feel like when I come into a classroom, kind of the default expectation is that the teacher at the front of the room is doing the teaching and the students are doing the learning. And I think obviously there's a lot of truth to that, obviously in the college classroom. But it's in those moments when, students, maybe a brave student raises their hand to ask a question or to respond to a prompt that I have on the screen. Sometimes I have students kind of share kind of anonymously kind of questions or thoughts they have about the lecture, so that all the students, but also myself, can see it on our phones. What I have learned from students is just that it challenges me to rethink kind of psychological science differently. Obviously, I think a core concept in developmental psychology is that we are influenced by different kind of socializers, parents, we have peers, we have teachers, we come from kind of large, small cities, different cultures, learning different languages. And so every semester, the group of students who come into the classroom, it's just a different kind of diverse mix of these kind of very kind of different but valuable experiences and perspectives that are just waiting to be shared. And so I oftentimes may need to check my own assumptions about college students or about how people develop or should develop, because there's always something different that challenges me to think about, that might be my experience, but your experience is different, and we can also learn from your experience, kind of your challenges. And I want to be able to kind of share that with all the students. And I do feel like it's kind of it's not learning that's going to start and end in my classroom, obviously. In college, students take at least 2-3 dozen courses, right, over the course of their time here at UK. And so I just hope to play a small part to kind of help them appreciate that there are different ways of developing, different ways of interacting, and that we can all learn from each other.
So we've all had sort of a rough 4 or 5 years here, since the pandemic. And, we're well past the pandemic, the illness part of the pandemic, but I feel like we're still feeling effects from the pandemic, especially in students. How have you seen that sort of manifest itself in the student population? And maybe, how have they surprised you, with how they've responded or how they're reacting to that?
Yeah, so I came to UK, my first semester was the fall of 2020, so it was a challenging transition for me teaching at UK. In my office, had a standing desk, and I had a Zoom room. Many students did not, turn on their videos, and that's cool with me. And it was kind of an awkward experience, obviously, but thinking, kind of reflecting on my kind of past kind of few years here, what I've noticed is I think there's a greater kind of appreciation, just the fact that, we get to teach, we get to come to university. I think the in-person engagement, I feel like it's valued more just because we lost so much of that during COVID. I love a great performance, but it's so hard to give a performance in my office, pretending like, talking to a webcam is the same. It's just not the same, which is why, when I come into a classroom, kind of the energy I get from the students, and sometimes that energy, like it's early in the morning, sometimes, I need their energy as much as they need energy from me. So we kind of feed off of each other. But I do feel like students kind of crave kind of meaningful in-person experiences with professors. I also feel kind of as a psychologist, I think we care a lot about kind of well-being of the whole person, right? Not just one's physical health, but also one's mental health. And so I think there's also been a greater appreciation for kind of taking care of oneself and those that we care about. And, I feel like it's been kind of one of my responsibilities to kind of convey that kind of value to students, that sometimes you can't learn if, things are, you can't learn as well as you can if there are other things happening in your life. And so providing, more compassion, kind of as a psychologist, maybe kind of walking that walk, saying your whole being matters has been something that, I've taken away, and something that I've also tried to kind of take to heart myself in my own teaching.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to me having a teenage daughter who, I'm sort of watching this real time with her. And then I didn't start teaching until sort of a bit after COVID had sort of wound down. But it's interesting to me that students are I feel like they're a little more ready to say when they're not okay, and which I'm so happy that they do. That's what I encourage them all every semester. You just need to communicate with me. That's the main thing, is you need to talk to me. You need to tell me what's going on. You don't have to be specific, but you need to tell me what's going on. What advice would you give to students who maybe are experiencing various kinds of difficulties in their academic life or their, personal life?
Sure. Speaking from both experience, but also my role as a developmental psychologist here, we all go through tough patches, and sometimes tough times tend to happen at like times when you least expect, or maybe it's a very inconvenient time to be going through a tough challenge. I feel like what I love about our psychology department, but also kind of the university as a whole, is we care a lot about each other. We care not just about our own colleagues, but also, the students that we work with, both in the classroom and in our research labs. I do really feel like, we want students to find fulfillment in what they do, but also that they do so in a way that, I think it's just tough to be a college student, right? It's not just college is just challenging academically, but also, you're learning how to do a lot of you're learning how to adult. And I remember I made a lot of embarrassing mistakes when I was a college student that I'd rather not share. But there's just so much growth. And what we learn from developmental psychology is that, emerging adulthood is this time where, yes, you might be an adult, like you might be over 18, but there's still so much that you need to learn about, not just academically, but also about just how to kind of function in this very complex society that we live in. I would say, if you're going through challenges, that this too shall pass. There are people that want to help you. Certainly, if one of my students, shared a challenge, my role is not, and my priority is not necessarily that they learn the material, but I want them to be well as well. I want them to just, what can I do as just a fellow human being to kind of help you through this tough time? Or how can I provide support? And so I would encourage students to kind of learn how to kind of seek out support. It's not something that you can do yourself, nor should you be expected to do. But I feel like this is a time where you can kind of appreciate all sorts of people, maybe even people that you don't know, but you'll make a new friend, you'll find a new mentor, someone who you can learn from that can provide you support when things get tough. But I think you'll find someone in the university community who can help you with that.
Yeah, my daughter, who's a freshman in college, will frequently come to me and say, I don't know how to be an adult. And I'm like, you're not supposed to know how to be an adult yet. And you don't have to learn it all at once. Like, that's where I think that's the issue is, they're learning how to be a grown up. They have to start dealing with medical things and making appointments and all of this kind of stuff. Plus learning psychology and learning English and learning, journalism or whatever they're taking. And so it gets overwhelming. And, my daughter is a nursing student, and so she's learning anatomy, and, which is overwhelming to me just on its own. But it's, I always tell people, like, even if you're not talking to me, please be talking to somebody. Find somebody, that you trust, whether it's, faculty, a family friend, whatever, but find your people and lean on those people is always my big advice to students.
Now that you mentioned that, a metaphor that I recently saw that I feel kind of applies really well here is, when you turn 18, your adulting age is 0. Like you're now kind of in the world, you're expected to do things, but you really don't know what you're doing, because how would you? And then you kind of, you enter your 20s, and then maybe your adulting age is now 10. Like you have some experience, you have a job, you're juggling finances, maybe starting a family, and then kind of your adulting age is 20, 30, you just kind of extend from that, age 18 point. And, once I read that, I see that as a good metaphor to kind of think that, like, to appreciate that, with a new beginning is another opportunity to kind of learn to adopt this new kind of role that you have, but also that you're not expected to do everything on day one when you come to college. That is a lofty expectation that no one should put on themselves.
Yeah, I'm going to steal that totally. Your 18 is your adult age is 0. That's great. I'm going to take that home to my daughter tonight, actually. So this award, like I said, has been around since I think the mid 60s or so. And the Alumni Association has kind of kept it going through, some trying times, and has felt that it's important enough to recognize good teaching to keep it going. What would you like to say to the Alumni Association, about receiving this award? Well,
first, I'm truly honored. I know there's so many deserving, talented teachers in my department and across the university. But the fact that I was nominated by one of my students, I feel I was honestly overwhelmed when I heard about the news. I think it's a good thing I was sitting down when I was teaching my grad seminar, because it was just, everything was happening all at once. But, I feel like the Alumni Association, having done this award for kind of many decades now, I do feel teaching is just, I feel, an important part of, my role in terms of helping students kind of fall in love with learning. Learning psychology is great, as I'm a psychologist, but just falling in love with learning, kind of the idea that, like, we can conduct research on human behavior, and that can change how we teach in school, how we interact with people, how we can become better employees, parents, partners. And so I feel kind of being able to convey that information and insights in a way that students can appreciate, but also just kind of have fun doing so. I'm kind of just honored to have been recognized alongside the other award winners this year, to really kind of place the focus on quality teaching at the university. So I'm just very grateful and thankful to my mentors and my colleagues in the department at the university, because I also feel like it takes a village. And so kind of that support, as well as students in my lab and across the courses that I've taught, have really helped me to hone my teaching, and I continue to, get better at it as I continue to pursue my career here at UK.
One thing we didn't touch on that we should is tell me a little bit about your research and tell me a little bit about your lab.
Sure. So I run the Developing Minds Lab here at UK. So our lab focuses on studying the development of academic motivation in K through 12 and post-secondary students. So, for example, I'll give you some examples. So questions like, why do some children keep going when they encounter a challenging task? And why do some children give up quickly? What types of feedback and praise do teachers give to students that allow them to continue to persist when things get tough? What messages do students receive from parents and teachers that help them set goals and to motivate themselves to pursue and accomplish things? So those are some of the broad questions that we answer and explore in our lab. So our lab, we have a very talented group of graduate and undergraduate students, and it's one of, I feel like our lab meetings for me is such a wonderful combination of research and teaching, because it's in our lab meetings where we conduct research on the development of motivation, but students play a very active role in conducting the research. They'll help collect data. They have presented at the Showcase of Undergraduate Scholars here at UK and at other kind of national conferences as well. I do feel kind of the work that we do in our research lab really meshes really well with kind of my teaching mission in the classroom, because you want to motivate. How do you get students to be motivated to learn? Sometimes, how do you get teachers to also get motivated to teach things? And so there's always something new that I take from my research lab into the classroom and vice versa.
Last question. Is there anything you'd like to say to the student that nominated you?
Eva, thank you for nominating me. I very clearly kind of remember and appreciate all the times that, even in our large lecture hall, you were an active participant. You asked thoughtful questions. You contributed in a way that really enhanced the overall learning experience of your fellow students, but also your interaction and engagement also gave me the motivation, the energy to kind of get through each and every lecture. So I'm grateful that you took the time to nominate me. Again, I know that you could have nominated many other very excellent, deserving candidates, but the fact that you nominated me means so much to me, Eva. So thank you so much. And I want to make sure that this award gives me the motivation and the commitment to continue excellent quality teaching at the university.
Dr. Matthew Kim, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Blue. Behind the Blue is a joint production of the University of Kentucky and UK Healthcare. For more stories about UK and UK healthcare, visit uknow.uky.edu.